All right. You know what, man? This is one of my favorite people because this guy shared a room with my guy, Jerome Brown. Hey, can you wait a minute now? Keith Jackson, Keith Byars, and Jerome. Woo! Philly must have been on its ear back in the day with them dudes rolling around town. But I'm really privileged to get our friend on here, and we really look forward to hearing his take when it comes to the signing of Saquon Barkley. And let me tell you this about Keith. Here he is, Keith Byars here. I told Keith, I told people you were ahead of your time because you could go out and get 900 yards rushing, turn around and get 900 yards receiving, and this was before people didn't even throw the ball to running back. So you were kind of like ahead. Can you imagine what you would be making today if you played in the NFL with your skill set?
Oh my gosh, I try not to. Sometimes me and the guys, from the 80s and 90s, we sit around the campfire and we talk about it. We're like, wow, we were just a little too early, just a little too soon. But we were still appreciative that what we made while we played, because we would talk to the old heads and they're like, back in my day, I was like, wow, but we were closer to them in salary than we are today with the guys in salaries. It is a difference. I still remember going on strike in 1987. One of our theme was for guys that played, the past, present, and future. Where the future is now. So we sacrificed, 1987, I sacrificed a quarter of my salary, for those guys. When you weren't making the same money we're making today, that's not the same. Yes, it is. A quarter of a salary of how much money you make. You use a quarter of your salary.
Hey, Keith, I was
in a
involved
moment.
in that
Strike.
I was
We had
involved
a
in that
movement for
strike,
them.
Keith, and it was my rookie year. And all I remember is that, for me back then, here's this kid making, for the first time, I'm making $10,000, $15,000 a week. If you prorate that out to right now, that was a lot of money for me. And we missed those 4 games, and they promised we'd get those 4 games back at pay. Keith, I'm still waiting for that.
You're still waiting on it. I know. I would love to have that back today. Yes, with a little interest.
Absolutely.
That
Keith,
would be awesome.
Get your take. What do you make of the Barkley sign to the Eagles?
I love it. I love it. I hated the Eagles had to play against them twice a year, because when they played the Giants, find Saquon. He is the key to that offense. Find him. And when you sign a guy in free agent, overall, any free agent, you look for a difference maker. Saquon is a difference maker. He's a difference maker. He can score from anywhere on the football field. He's dangerous. Handing the ball, as a running back. As a pass catcher out of the backfield. Worst case scenario, you can put him back there on punt returns. He is a difference maker, and they haven't had somebody like that in quite some while. I'm thinking of Brian Westbrook. Was the last guy that was dangerous out of the backfield and running the football. For the Eagles, and so for them to get somebody like a Brian Westbrook, probably Brian Westbrook on steroids.
Yeah,
he's that good when he's healthy.
How about this, Keith? For you, when you went from the Eagles to the Dolphins, what type of transition is that when you're going from one system and one place that relied on you just about the entire offensive output to where now you're going to a place that's got, all-stars at almost every single position in the skill set, guys, the quarterback, the wide receivers, the tight end, the O-line's exceptional. What kind of transition do you go through with that as a player?
Well, as a player, that's where chemistry really comes into play. When you see so much talent around you, how do we mix off the field as well as on the field? Because, when I left the Eagles to go to the Dolphins, we were loaded. Had Keith Jackson, the tight end, Urban Fryer, and Mark Green, wide receiver. O.J. McDuffie was the number 1 draft pick. And you got, the ultimate weapon, beyond the center, Dan Marino. Yes, weapons all over your offense. And so we need that chemistry. And that's what we had, in Miami. Guys were unselfish. Brother, you only can throw it to the guy. You need more than one football. But we didn't care as long as you win, and that's what the Eagles, need this year. Get back to what got them to the Super Bowl was, guys got to be unselfish. This week you may get 10 balls, next week you may get 2 balls, but as long as the team is winning and you're going in a positive direction, that's what it's all about. And I think with Saquon Barkley, coming to the Eagles, you don't have to take him off the field unless you just need a breather. But I want to see the Eagles offense take another step. They took about 2 steps back, from 2022 to 2023 offensively. I'm not going to say Jalen Hurts regressed, but the offense regressed. That means everybody, from the play caller, on down. They just didn't. They took 2 steps back, last year offensively.
How about this, Keith? You're adding him. You're bringing Kellen Moore in. It's a whole different dynamic. He's not really a screen pass guy. It's going to be interesting to see. And as you said, will the Eagles be able to deal with maybe somebody suffering when it comes to touches? I mean, there's only one football, Keith. That's got to be a priority in the conversation. Do you think in the offseason? Is that established in the offseason that you have to have everybody on the same page as the September comes around? Because somebody's not going to have a big day one day. They may be the third game. How does that work?
You're right. I mean, I talk about that all the time, on my show. If you want to have a good regular season, it starts in the off season. It starts now when no one is looking. You need the chemistry. You need to form those bonds. Off season workouts and OTAs, all that's important. And then when you're away from the locker room, how do you guys get along, socially? Do y'all ever go out to dinner? Do you ever go over each other's houses? To form those kind of bonds. So even though we're not doing a football activity, that's first and foremost on our minds is winning football. How can I get better? And so you build that rapport with your teammates. I mean, everybody don't have to be buddy. Come over to my house, don't go over your house. But you got to have that chemistry where when you come to work, it's a time and a place for everything. It's time to laugh and joke. But when we step on that field, it's all about business. When we go into our meetings, it's about business. And then it's time to unwind, let your hair down a little bit and relax so that everybody's on one accord, come game day. Because that's the only thing we're going to remember at the end of the day. Did you perform on Sunday or did you not? Because that's how everyone's happy. Everyone's going to be here when we are winning, when you're doing what you're supposed to do. Last year, the Eagles season stopped at Thanksgiving. After Thanksgiving, I'm like, did the Eagles know they still have more football to play? Because you could just tell it was just like letting the clock run out. Just like we know they lost 2 in a row, they lost 3 in a row. You end up losing 6 of your last 7, guys. You quit before that Tampa Bay game in the playoffs. We knew the season was over with. It was just go through the formality, and you could just see it on the players' looks on their faces. They had that defeated look. They didn't have the same look on their faces when they were, going to the Super Bowl and, had a lead in the second half of the Super Bowl. It was about, let's go get better. Last year, they just lost it. So it's still in that locker room. I still believe in them, but this offseason is crucial. That's when they got to get that love of the game back again.
I love what you're saying, Keith. I mean, how much do you think that has a chance of carrying over? Like when you're 10-2, 10-1, all of a sudden you see guys, just laying down. You're getting beat by Drew Lock. You're getting beat by Tyrod Taylor. You're getting beat by bad teams. And then, as you said, the final nail in the coffin was the Buck game. The Bucks scored 9 points against Carolina the week before, and you couldn't score 10 points against that Bucks team that you beat earlier in the year. And like you said, Keith, you knew they gave up. That's why this offseason here, they're not real big on OTAs. They're not real big on training camp. You think it's a priority this year for them to get on the same page again and put that bad taste out of their mouth?
Oh, absolutely. And rapport. Here it is, a month of March. Everybody should be starting to had your vacation already. It's time to put in the work and get back to work about winning football. And it's good that they went through a season like last year. You had the high and then you had the low. But the previous year you was at the Super Bowl. Philadelphia is a great town to win football games in. It's a horrible town to lose football games in. And so, now take the sweet. It's a lot better than the bitter. So this all season should be rough on the Eagles. They should, take more arrows and spears because the season didn't end the way they wanted it to. And we don't love the players any less or the organization any less. We just expect more, and we know so do they. And go in there and do the hard work right now when no one is watching. And, you're bringing in Saquon Barkley. Let him fit in the locker room. Get to know Saquon well before September. So I want to see those guys have fun again. And ways, to win football games. And that's why, in Philadelphia, it's a city of brotherly love. Everyone in that locker room ought to have that same spirit, of the city. And that's just holding your family member accountable. Yeah, I think they got away from that, last year. If their lips could say something else, but their actions would show they got away from what made them special in 22. And they have to know it's not just a switch that you flick on; it's something that they work on daily. I mean, and I look at Jalen Hurts from his rookie year up until the Super Bowl year. You could just see the hunger. He got better and better and better. And in 23, I still see traces of him getting better, but the offense wasn't there. I mean, I don't know. The play calling was atrocious. How do you not have hot reads? They're blitzing and you don't have nobody breaking off, short. And then you blaming the quarterback. I'm like, that's everybody. It's not just the quarterback. It's the coordinator. It's everyone else's, this is, professional football. And you're not making side adjustments? What is going on? Hey, Jalen, go be special. No, no, no. It's everyone. Everyone needs to be held accountable for that. So now it's off season. It's time to go back and reestablish your core. Because the off season is when you set your goals on what we're going to be like, what kind of team we're going to be. I ask every team that same question: what is our identity? You talk about it during the off season, and then during the season, you go out there and prove this is who we really are. You can talk about we're a tough guy, we're gonna be more hard nosed, we're gonna do that. Okay, let's talk for the off season. Then the season comes around, go prove it. When they do the Philly shove on 4th and 1, everyone in the country knows it's coming, and they get it. They're not being denied. They need that kind of attitude on 1st and 10, 2nd and medium, 3rd and short. Hey, we are going to be a successful offense. And the same mentality on defense. Hey, they forgot how to tackle. They thought they were playing two-hand touch. That was atrocious defense that we watched out of Eagles. You talk about Philadelphia Eagles defense, that's a standard to live up. They're hard-nosed, knock you in the dirt, defense when you put on that Eagle green jersey. We're not a finesse defense. Eagles defense is the one knock back, slobber knocker hits. We didn't see that out of them last year. That's not Eagle defense that we are accustomed to watching. And that's why I go back to, what is your identity? So head coach Nick Sirianni, he needs to talk around right now. What is our identity? Put up the film from last year. That's who we are, or who we not. Like my old coach Bill Parcells used to say, you are what your record says you are. So not just your record. So whatever the Eagles say, this is what our offseason is going to be about. We're going to be more hard nosed. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to be that's all talk. But then when the season gets here in September, go out there and establish it. Go out there and be it.
Keith, how about this? Okay, I love what you're saying because it's the mentality you have to have. But how do you use Barkley when you've just given him more money than anybody's ever received in Philadelphia Eagle, Kelly Green, at the position? You're finally putting a priority on the position that you haven't in years. Now, to justify it, are you going to give him the ball 20 times? Is that going to be more your identity? Are you putting the RPOs back in? You've got 2 1,000-yard receivers. Now you just bring in a back who's arguably one of the top backs in the National Football League. How do you use him? I mean, for you, Keith, what's the value for him? I know he's better in pass protection. He's a better pass catcher, but the Eagles don't throw flares, and they don't throw, like you said, they don't throw screens. Are you going to implement that with Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator? Are you going to run the ball more? Who gets less touches? I mean, how do you use Saquon Barkley? There's only one football.
Well, for me, every Sunday, if Saquon is not touching the ball 20 times. Now that could be 15 carries and 5 catches.
Yep.
But he needs to get the ball 20 times. Figure out an offense, run him a halfback option. The same way Christian McCaffrey, runs in San Francisco. There's plenty of offense that you can find out, for Saquon Barkley, other than just running him between the tackles 25, 30 times a game and not throwing him no pop. He can catch flares. He can be the check down, and he can just get some design plays for him. If he's touching the ball 20 times. How many times do we want to get the ball to AJ? We want to get the ball to AJ at least 10 targets. If we throw the ball to AJ 10 times, he got to come back with 7. Devontae Smith, if we throw the ball to him 10 times, he ought to come back with 7. I just described 40 plays. You only got about 55 or 60 in a typical offensive game in the pros. That means the tight end is going to get between 3 and 5 this week, and the other running backs are going to get about 3 to 5 carries. That's a team with an identity, because there's not that many plays in the game. So, Devontae, you got 10 targets. I need you to bring it back 7. So, AJ, you got 10. I need you to bring back 7. And if there's going to be outliers, there's going to be some games they catch over 10 balls. But if they're getting 20 targets in a game, the Eagles are probably losing that game.
Yeah.
We're not probably winning those games. I'm describing a winning formula, and Saquon has got to be a major part of it.
A year ago, because if you look at the pass numbers, get this, 36% of the targets went to AJ, and they threw to the numbers. Hurts had an 8% quarterback rating, an 8 quarterback rating in the middle of the field. They had 36 pass receptions at a wide receiver 3, very limited in pass catching. You're talking about the formula spreading the football out. So people are going to have to really come down in their targets and accept that to play winning They didn't play winning football in the second half of the season.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, and you can do that what I described without having to just be like, oh gosh, we haven't thrown him the ball yet. That ought to be a part of your normal offense of getting these guys the ball, moving them around. Don't just put them out there on the islands at an X receiver and let them get doubled and say, well, we can't throw you the ball because you doubled. Move them. Put AJ and Devontae on the same side and cause matchup. Run some combination routes with them. With our tight ends, oh gosh. You let, like the same way me and Keith Jackson used to work the backside. We put Carter and Mike Quick on one side, and me and Keith Jackson will work the other side. You got to spread out. You got to put pressure on the defense. And and with our guys, I mean, we got enough weapons on that team that the offense coordinator ought to come to work every day smiling. Look what I get to work with. I got Dallas Goedert. Oh, look what I get to deal with. I got weapons. I didn't even mention the backup running backs. There's room for them to get some touches also.
I gotta ask.
That's a team with an identity.
How about this, Keith? I'm very biased, so it's gonna be a hard question to ask you here. The retirement of Fletcher Cox. I said this about him in his 12 years. Spectacular player. Is he better than Jerome, or is Jerome better than him? He carried a great tradition on. I'm too biased. Obviously, the career was cut short, but Fletcher was a spectacular football player. He'll knock on potentially the Pro Football Hall of Fame door. He's one of the greatest tackles in the history of the Eagles. I just don't think he had the skill set of JB, but I mean, he's in the conversation at least. Is that fair?
Yes, it's fair. That's fair. It's funny because you talk about the Hall of Fame. I always laugh now. I've gotten this age. I don't know what a Hall of Famer is because I used to. I thought I knew. I'm being sarcastic somewhat, but I'm glad Fletcher just retired. It hasn't even been a week since he retired, and I was like, just take a deep breath, give it about 6 months. And we appreciate how great a player he is and was, for the Eagles. Because you've had some time since our great friend Jerome Brown has been gone. And, we even after only seeing Jerome for 5 years, for the Eagles, we knew how special he was then, and time has not diminished that. We have Jerome's been gone almost 30 years, 30
Yeah.
years, 32
Yeah.
years.
Yep.
I mean, and we still remember how great he was. So
Phenomenal.
we'll talk about Fletcher Cox also in 10, 15, 20 years of how great a player it's still too fresh that we kind of take, great players for granted. So when the fall, where's Fletcher? He's not there. But we don't need all that time to know that when you talk about defensive tackles in the Philadelphia Eagles organization, there's room for 2 starters. He's starting along with Jerome Brown.
And you're so on point with Jerome. See, I really only needed 3 years ago. Just like with Sean Taylor, we're very fortunate at the University of Miami to have had those players play at our place. And both those guys were on their way to Canton. And after year 3, Jerome was on his way to Canton if everything played the way it was out. So I didn't really know that about Fletcher early in his career. His is more like you said. And by the way, there's no shade on anything. I think he's spectacular. But Jerome was just – because I get asked this a lot because, like you said, Fletcher just retired. And I get asked, do you think he's better than JB? And I'm like, man, you're really talking about somebody that was a game-changing dude that, I mean, not only did you have the greatest end of all time and maybe the greatest defensive lineman, but you had a guy who was going to be one of the greatest tackles of all time. I mean, that's all. And you're on that Eagle defense. Everybody was great at every level. So, I mean, those 2 guys stood out on a team of great players. I mean, like you say, Keith, when you're great and you stand out in a crowd, especially a crowd like that, you're special.
Sure. I mean, let me add this to you because I shy away from GOAT conversations, the greatest of all time.
Yep.
I get that question a ton. And the reason why I shy away from it, because we end up doing comparables. And when you compare, you automatically want to knock down the other guy so you can prop up the guy you're talking about. And I'm like, we're talking about all great players. And I said, and when I get, especially around, let's say I'm sitting around a campfire, smoking a cigar with a bunch of guys, and I'll just tell them in football, I'm 60 years old now, believe it or not. I look good for my age, but I'm 60. In the NFL, the NFL is only 105 years old, 103 years old, or whatever it is. So I've seen a lot of the NFL. And I said, in the whole NFL, I could only come up to, in my professional opinion, 2 GOAT. You mentioned one, Reggie White. For me, Reggie White is the greatest defensive end to ever play the game. Lawrence Taylor is the greatest outside linebacker to play the game. That also means there's defensive tackles, there's inside linebackers, and so those are the only 2 positions that I could come up with and say that they're the best. There's a lot of great defensive ends that play football, a lot of great outside linebackers that ever played football. But Reggie White, that's including Deacon Jones and Bruce Smith or anybody or these little young guys right now. They're not Reggie White. He could play the run, the pass, and everything else. Lawrence Taylor is the greatest outside linebacker that ever played. Lawrence Taylor didn't play middle linebacker. I'm not talking about middle linebacker. I'm talking about outside linebacker. So then when they talk about quarterbacks, it's Tom Brady. No, Tom Brady's a great player. Yes, you say Montana. I say Dan Marino. Someone else may say Johnny Unitas. It's a ton of great players that have played the quarterback position. So I would say arguably the best quarterback because I don't talk about team awards when I go to get into GOAT conversations. Well, how many Super Bowls did he win? Well, football's a team award. Winning Super Bowls are team awards. Otherwise, why Terry Bradshaw? His team won 4. But nobody's going to say Terry Bradshaw was one of the top 5 quarterbacks or top 10 quarterbacks of all time. So Tom Brady won 7 Super Bowls. Great. That's a heck of an accomplishment. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play. Keyword, one of the greatest, not the greatest. Because he would have had a heck of a time playing against those defensive of the 80s and the 90s and the 70s. when they
Keith,
could, as long as they didn't touch the face mask. It's a different game.
Keith, I always say this. When you talk about the GOAT conversation, if you had a 2-minute drill and you had to pick a quarterback, who are you picking to win a ball game? That ain't got nothing to do with trophies. That's got everything to do with winning ball games. Who you taking?
I'm close. I got a blindfold on. I got 3 names on the wall, and I don't care if it's Marino, Elway, Montana. I'm gonna hit one of those names on the target. I'll be happy.
Yeah.
Let's go win the football game, guys.
Like you
give me one of those 3.
Give me the third dude.
Yes, and be very happy about it. Be very, very happy about
it. Finally here for you. When you watch Christian McCaffrey and how everyone they glow over what he does in a game, do you sit back with your family and do this? Shit, man.
That's what y'all impressed with.
I did that for 12.
He does.
What are they talking about here? I mean, Keith, when I got you on, I went, he must sit there when he watches people going, this guy McCaffrey, he's the best. I did that 15, 20 years ago every Sunday.
And I blocked the blitzing linebacker. I had to block Lawrence Taylor with no help. So Christian McCaffrey, he's not blocking that outside linebacker on the blitz.
No way.
He's not stepping up in the A gap, taking on the middle linebacker. You don't have to do that. And I love Christian McCaffrey's game, but I'm like, it's a different game. Imagine Seth Joyner saying, I got Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, but I think I'm blitzing, see if he can pick, he's gonna pick up blitz pickup. Christian McCaffrey be like, hey, coach, can we get another back in here? I don't want to block Seth Joyner. I don't want to block Willie Thomas, Byron Evans. I don't want to block those guys. So it'll be a different game. It's just different. I appreciate Christian McCaffrey's talent, but I'm like, been there, son, seen that already with bonuses.
Absolutely. Keith, you were spectacular as always, and you found time for me.
Thank you,
I want to thank you so much for doing this, my friend.
All right, Dan, anytime. I'm glad I could make time for you.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. The great Keith Byars, I really appreciate him doing this. Please hit the like button. Keep it here, National Football Show.